These gentlemen are famous, amazing psychologists and researchers, Edward Giese and Richard Ryan. And together, they created the self-determination theory of motivation. In it, they state intrinsic motivation develops from within. It's also reliant upon 3 basic human needs being met. So essentially, to the degree that each of these needs are met is the degree to which we will be intrinsically motivated for a task. So the first one is autonomy. And autonomy is characterized by things like choice, enjoyment, interest, effort, risk-taking, and fun. The second is competence, also known as mastery. And that has to do with our need for deep understanding, to really understand what we're learning, and to be optimally challenged. We want to have a challenge, but if it's too hard, we might give up. We might feel it's hopeless. If it's too easy, we're not interested. It has to be just right. It has to be in that sweet spot. And then the third is relatedness, also known as purpose. And this is also characterized through caring and connectedness with others. You will be able to get a QR code at the end and snap a picture and get this all on PDF. So if I'm going too fast for you, don't worry about that. All right. So there's a couple of more recent studies that might interest you. I did one for my dissertation, and I worked these students really hard. They had to do this trumpet methods class, and in it they learned over 50 songs by ear in 5 major and minor keys. They learned to transpose, they learned to improvise, all of this on a secondary instrument. And what was reported in this study, as a result of the study, was that they experienced a high degree of feelings of autonomy, competence, and relatedness within this class. And they also were willing to practice more frequently than they had for any previous secondary instrument classes they had had. And they were very eager to take risks and seek challenges. So my goal in this class was, of course, to teach them these things, but I did it in an atmosphere designed to support their autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And those were the results. And there's also another recent study. This is from a couple of researchers in Australia. And they examined self-determined motivation in university music students, where they did all kinds of surveys and information. And they found that when students' psychological needs were met, meaning autonomy, competence, and relatedness, that they demonstrated autonomous motivation by practicing more frequently, engaging in high-quality practice sessions, and exhibiting a higher preference for challenging tasks. So we have a little connectedness here. So, autonomy support. Ways we can support autonomy for our students. 1, create opportunities for them to have some choices, to share in those choices, to share in decisions. I'm sure some of you have some great ideas for things that you do in your classroom. And this is a great way to help support your students' autonomy. You need to offer them more experiences where they get to be expressive from themselves. We do this easily in music if we're teaching them to improvise and compose. It's huge. It's something we have built right into our profession. You also have to seek to understand your students' perspectives. A little empathy goes a long way. People are more open. Think about yourself, right? You're more open to working hard for a boss who says to you, oh man, I'm so sorry that I heard that your baby's sick. You know, I'm so sorry. I hope everything's okay. If you need any support or help, you let me know. you're a lot more likely to want to come into work even when it's tough, right? So you can see how that can affect all of our lives. It's also important to create a classroom environment that supports musical risk-taking. It has to feel safe. It has to be okay to make a mistake. In music, let's face it, that's how we learn. We have to learn by making mistakes. And I make them all the time, and I let them know, oops, sorry gang, my fault, my mistake, let's try again. And I make no big deal of it, and then they know it's no big deal if they make a mistake. It's really comforting for them, and they're more inclined to take a risk. They're more willing to walk up to a microphone and play a solo in front of hundreds of people and be fine with it. Create opportunities for student-led small ensembles. Great, I'm sure some of you already do that, and you can see how inspirational that is, how much more willing those students are to practice, to get prepared for those situations. This is an example of a student composition. So I encourage that a lot. I teach composition with my students, and in this particular group, this was a saxophone class of 3 saxophones of little different ability levels, but together they worked on a composition that I sat back and watched them do. And then it was so wonderful, they got to be featured on a concert. So now we need to figure out how we're going to support their competence or mastery in music. So probably the most important thing is you need to teach them using a curriculum that includes intrinsic musical behaviors. Right? Those are singing, moving, learning by ear, improvising, and composing. Students can learn this from the beginning. You can begin to lay the foundation for every one of those skills. You want to teach a large repertoire of tunes in many tonalities, meters, styles. Teach them songs by ear. Teach them melody, teach them bass, teach them harmony. Right? It's not that hard to do that. All right? Let's take I wasn't planning this, but let's take an example. Let's do Pierrot. We know that melody, right? All right, now I can teach them the melody, and then I say, okay, that melody has a bass line. Do, 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 and it repeats. Do, okay, so sing melody, sing bass line. Bum, 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 ready, sing. Do, 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 do. When you're hearing this note, that's do, also meaning tonic when we're in major, do. If you hear this note, that's so, that's telling you it's dominant. That's a dominant function in major. So do. Students are starting to get a much deeper understanding of the music they are learning to play. They're not just learning to play a melody anymore. Right? I think back, I learned all these melodies, but no one was teaching me the bass line. No one was teaching me the harmony. And so I've had to play catch up in my life to figure all that out. The good news is you can do it. I'm an example. Right? By diving into this work and figuring out how can I give my students deeper understanding of the music that they're learning, I'm going to get better. My skills improved teaching elementary school instrumental music. I would have never guessed that could happen. But because of this approach, they did, and it's exciting. And by the end of 5th grade, these students understood chord progressions that included secondary dominants, passing diminished chords. Why? Because I taught them how they move from chord to chord, and we sang them. We sang everything. We sang more than we played. And so when they picked up their instruments to play, magic happened. It wasn't really magic, but it felt like it because it was here and then boom, it was here. And so, are you kidding me? Those kids were motivated. They wanted to practice. That's like set your life on fire kind of excitement. It makes me excited. You can see it in me. I can't hide it, right? This is like what I get excited about. All right. Oh, I got this mixed up. That's okay. We're going to teach content in manageable chunks. You've got to give it to them in the snippets that they can understand, that they can be successful with. Don't give them something that's too hard that they can't get. They'll be discouraged. Don't give them something that's so easy that they're bored. You have to find that perfect spot. Maintaining high expectations. That's a good thing. But you got to support them so they can get there. All right? You're going to give them positive, non-controlling feedback. It's not enough to just say, good job. That's all well and good, but it's really meaningless. You're not telling them anything. How about this phrase at letter A was absolutely flawlessly in tune. We had a little trouble with the pulse when we got to measure 17, and here's what we can do to fix it. That's informational feedback. That's the stuff they can take home with them and get better. And they want to go home and get better. That's why they're there. That's why they're with you. And you got to try to find their optimum challenge. One thing that's so cool about teaching students to play all kinds of different parts on a tune, this is built right in. Because if you have a student who struggles, you give them the easier part. You give them the part they're prepared to do. It might be the bass line, right? But if you've got a hot shot, somebody who's really good, well, give them the improvisation. Ask them to make up their own melody. There's always a challenge that's appropriate for every student if you look for it. All right, this, if I'm not mistaken, is a compilation of larger ensembles where I've got some beginner band performances where you can see some of the things that I did with beginner groups where they're playing in small ensembles being featured within the concert. A little snippet where it's a whole group, and it includes a 3rd grade recorder group that I put together to help build their skills, where they learned some recorder skills a half hour a week through the year, only learning by ear, melodies, bass lines, and harmonies. And then you'll hear a little bit of the 5th grade band. piece of the puzzle is supporting relatedness. I think this is something we do pretty well in music, because we want to provide opportunities for musical collaboration. And that can happen, of course, in a large group, it can happen in a small group, but it's that feeling of being connected to those around them, learning together, working together, and experiencing what music has to offer. Hopefully all of you have had that experience of being in an ensemble where it just felt like all of you became one. Time went away, you got into a feeling of flow, and it just feels magical. It's an amazing feeling. And the only way to get that is to become fully immersed in what you're doing, to really have a great depth of understanding of what you're playing, your ability to listen to those around you. I have a great suggestion. If you want to build relatedness, oh, and by the way, autonomy and competence, stop conducting your students in performance. I learned to do that. By the time I was in my last few years of teaching, I didn't conduct my jazz bands for 20 years, forever, but for some reason I thought I had to be in front of the concert band. Now I'm not saying you're not in front of them when you're teaching them. When you're teaching them, that's a whole nother story. But you need to help them get to the point where they don't need you. All right? That doesn't mean you can't be there. You can conduct, but the idea behind it is, have you helped your students become independent musicians? Can they play without you standing there? I hope so. We haven't given them much if we haven't given them that. You need to experience or provide lots of opportunities for the music making in the small group, and I just explained some of the reason for that. You need to give them some rationales to do the things they maybe don't want to do, right? All right, maybe you have a thing for scales and you want them to know their scales, and maybe they don't want to learn their scales. Well, if you give them good rationale for why it's going to help them become a better musician, they are going to be more likely to accept that and adopt this as their own belief, all right, over time. It doesn't happen immediately. I came up with something, though. I came up with a little etude that I called More Fun Than Scales. And it was an etude that was musical, and it essentially included a scale. It taught them the scale, but it was put into a tune. And what I did is I asked them to learn this tune by ear, learn it, and now we're going to do it in this key. Okay, now let's do it in that key. Now let's do it in this key. And they transpose, right? And they can do that. They can do that. You have to believe it, but they can. And now, instead of just teaching them what a scale is and having them look at their notation and still play a wrong note and have no idea what they've done, you've given them something that they can hear. And now they self-correct, right? You need your students to get to where they can self-correct, or you're going to drive yourself bonkers. This job's too hard, right? You got to help them get the skills so that they can teach themselves. All right, try to understand their challenges and provide help to students outside of class. These are all pretty obvious, being kind and caring, all right? Now, here's one option. Now, of course, this looks terrible on here, but if you do the scan, QR code scan, you can get this, it'll look perfectly clear. This is something I borrowed from my friend and colleague, Robert Bickford. And this fits some of the things that I was doing, only it's better, right? What he did is he created a practice checklist, right? He's not telling them, you have to do this, you have to do that for so many minutes, right? What he's saying is, okay, this week we want to work on, duple and triple rhythm patterns, articulations, melodic patterns. We're learning these songs here, all right? And then he's got all the sources for where they can get help. He's got QR codes to go and see a video that he made. All right, there's all the references for where to find those songs on the CDs they listen to when they play. Everything's on there, right? And so it's a checklist. It's can you do it? Can you get that skill? And then, I'm not sure what that says, but what I had on the bottom of mine was some more ideas. Maybe you could try doing this. How about if you learn hot cross buns in another key? How about if you figure out how to play it in triple meter? How about you give them suggestions for more, right? Now they're not just limited to what's on the checklist. You're giving them opportunities to be inspired. And then you're saying, oh, and by the way, if you figure out something I haven't even thought of, oh man, you got to come and play it for us. And you have, I mean, I would put up an elaborate display, and when they, oh, I learned a song, come on up. I'd have them come on up in front of the class, and they play, and the whole class like, woo! And I teach them how to bow. And let me tell you, that's inspiring for them. That's one of the reasons we like to play music, right? To play for someone else, to let them appreciate what we've learned and what we can do. So that would be a very helpful alternative to the typical practice record where they have to put so many minutes on, right, and have it signed. Now, it's up to you whether you want to have parents sign it. I just didn't even bother. I concerned myself more with what are our goals. And I found that students were incredibly responsive to that because they want to learn, they want to get better. And I spent time asking them, you know, I noticed that you're struggling a little bit in the lessons. You haven't gone as far on some things as I thought maybe you would. So how can I help you? Let's make a time. And I sit down with them and I help them through the things that they're struggling with. And sometimes it takes 5 minutes or 2 minutes, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, I get it, it's fine. Or I reassure them, this is a challenging task I'm asking you to do. Lip slurs on trumpet, oh man, those can be a real challenge, but here's how you can work on it to get better. And give them very, very clear, informational feedback. So, how can we support our students' intrinsic motivation for learning and for practice? Okay, for autonomy, we're going to give them choices. We're going to encourage opportunities for creativity. And we're going to make them feel safe to take a risk. For competence, we're going to think about the curriculum. What are we teaching them and how are we teaching them? Are we providing them with this level of understanding that's going to really help them become competent, masterful musicians? Right? And are we giving them the appropriate level of challenge? Relatedness, give them opportunities to collaborate. Give them opportunities. Make sure that you are showing them that you understand their circumstances and provide them with ample support. Consider a checklist for practice records and include optional items to inspire more practice and opportunities for performance that inspire more practice. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for coming. Appreciate it.